that's a line I can't cross, and it absolutely boils my blood. I have quite literally acquired a tool that I am admitting I don't need. Hello, my name's Connor. Welcome to Ready, Set, Enjoy. And today we're going to be talking about a bit of a flummoxing topic, which is, what is the point of EDC? Now, I want to be clear that I'm not saying there's no point to EDC. I'm quite literally asking the question, what is the point of EDC? I think I have a good varied set of, experiences on this topic, on the topic of being ready, of being, prepared for emergencies and unexpected twists and turns. But also, I have a lot of experience not needing any of that stuff, which is where some of my flummoxed attitude has come from. So yes, this is going to be a bit of a rambling video, and it's mostly going to be me sitting here and talking. So if that's not the kind of thing that you're into, I totally get it. Feel free to click off and go look at something else. That makes perfect sense. I do, however, want to have a conversation, in the comments or wherever, because I legitimately am rethinking some of my own practices and, thoughts around what does all of this matter and why am I doing it in the first place. So stick around if you want to be part of this conversation, and let's get right into it. So first of all, why did I choose to make this video this week? Because just last week I filmed a review of an EDC tool, the Smith Blade Pro. And so turning around and making a video on the merits of everyday carry seems a bit strange. But I've actually been thinking about this for a few weeks, and it was kind of catalyzed by a video that I saw, and I'll link it here. It was, kind of a comedy slash surrealist take on people who, take EDC way too seriously and all of this. And yeah, it was funny, and I thought it was quite hilarious. I showed it to my wife. She thought it was hilarious too. And I forgot about it for a minute, but then I kept coming back to it and thinking to myself, okay, there's kind of a kernel of truth to that video, which is why it was so funny in the first place. And so what should I actually be reconsidering based on that? If I'm laughing at the absurdity of this video when realistically it is somewhat true, then am I absurd? Do I do some things that are over the top and ridiculous? And it got me thinking. And, this video is going to take a couple of different paths, but I don't think it's absurd. However, I do think that it's very easy to verge into absurdity if you're not careful. Now, there's no denying that EDC has, grown in its visibility online, and the community has evolved over the years. But I encourage you to go and look at something like Google Trends and look at how, searches for EDC and, related stuff like pocket knives and multi-tools and flashlights has evolved over the years. And if you do a little bit of digging, you'll see that there hasn't actually been a very dramatic increase in the number of people searching for these things over time. And I was a little bit confused by that, because I see so much of it on the internet that you would assume it has grown significantly in popularity over the past couple of years. But the 5-year trend is really not that dramatic. So what does that mean? Well, either I've just self-selected myself into a rabbit hole that the algorithm knows that I am interested in, and therefore it seems like this thing has grown, when in fact I have just gotten more narrow in my interest profile. Or it means perhaps that, a small group of creators and influencers has gotten, louder and has been able to, export their wares a little bit more broadly than they have in the past. I don't know which of those things is the reality, but it doesn't seem to me like the actual general population is rapidly, gaining in their interest in the topics of everyday carry. The one exception to that is the search term preparedness. If you go and look at the Google Trends, you'll actually see the last 2 years or so has shown a significant increase in people's interest in emergency preparedness, prepping, and some of those related topics. So that to me is interesting, and it leads me to what I think the first kind of real draw into the EDC world actually is. Now the world is more unpredictable than ever. I don't think you can go a week in these latest years without seeing something a little bit absurd or fantastical or terrifying happening in the news or online or wherever you choose to focus your attention. And so that, I think, leads a lot of people to feel uncertain and to feel like they're maybe losing a little bit of control over their life and their environment. And losing control is not fun. It's not a nice feeling. It's not something that anybody really wants to experience. But being able to, for lack of a better term, arm ourselves with a little bit of control in the form of, hey, I believe I have the gear. I believe I have developed the skills. I believe that I have the knowledge to get through these periods of uncertainty because I have learned how to, stock up on food, what my family would need to survive through a week-long blackout. I have accumulated all of the tools that would get me through a natural disaster, or I could use to, extract myself and my family out of my area if there was an earthquake or a forest fire. Just accumulating those things and having them at the ready, even if you've yet to actually use them, gives you a sense of regained control where the world around you is trying to take it from you. And that makes sense to me. And I believe I do that myself to a certain extent. I see, a massive snowstorm taking out the eastern seaboard, and I think to myself, what would I do if the power went out here for 4 days? I see forest fires taking over Jasper, recently in Canada, and I think to myself, what would happen if I had to get myself and my family, hundreds of kilometers away for their safety? And I go down that rabbit hole. And by thinking through these scenarios and accumulating knowledge and skills and gear, we start to regain some of that control and reassure ourselves that there is something we could do about it if a disaster like that were to happen to us. Now, on the flip side, there is the sillier aspects of EDC. I thought to myself last week when I looked at the garbage calendar and I saw that it was cardboard recycling week, and I found myself getting a little bit excited, and I was like, what on earth is that all about? And I realized it's like, okay, this is maybe the only time this week that I will seriously use my pocket knife. And some weeks, that's how it is. When you live in the suburbs, when you work at home, when you have an office job, there might be weeks where garbage day is the only real opportunity or use case for your everyday carry. And that thought made me a little bit sad. But then I thought to myself, why does this matter to me so much? Why does it matter that, maybe I don't pull my pocket knife out of my pocket for an entire day sometimes. But then other days, I use it 20 times. And there are other days where I have to strap a whole bunch of tools to my body because I'm drywalling or I'm putting in tile or I'm building, something at the cabin. And I realized that we carry tools and we, do EDC because of the unusual rather than the usual. Now, I'm talking about people like me who are office workers, not necessarily blue collar folk who are doing this day in, day out. I don't have that kind of life. I know there are people who legitimately do pull their Leatherman out of their pocket 15 times a day, every single day, because that's their job. They're a plumber, they're an electrician, they're a carpenter, and that's what they need. But there's a huge group of people who aren't like that. And so what do I actually need a pocket knife in my pocket every single day for? And it's to handle the unusual. It's not to, help me for the usual. And the unusual is garbage day. It is, there's a hook that I need to hang in my front hall. There is, a new child-proofing task that I need to undertake because we have a baby. It is home maintenance, like needing new baseboards or needing to hang pictures and, put together new furniture that gets purchased. These are all things that don't necessarily happen every day because a lot of days I'm sitting at this desk and I'm doing my job on my computer. But then there are unusual days where a lot is going on. We build up tasks because we don't have time for them every single day. But then that Saturday with no plans comes around and you're all of a sudden able to check a million things off your to-do list all at once, and you need to have those tools. Now, sometimes something unexpected comes up. For example, my son recently started crawling, and so I had to secure all of the loose things in our house, all the cabinets and all the bookshelves and all these things. And so I spent several days in a row. Any spare moment I had between meetings, I went around and was securing these things to the wall. And so I was using my multi-tool. I was pulling my toolbox out of the garage every single day. And that is actually unusual. But it was very necessary, and I didn't need to go acquire new tools. I had everything that I needed on hand to do those things because you never know when your kid is going to start crawling. You never know when you're going to break something and need to fix it. You never know when you're going to discover a cracked baseboard that needs to be replaced. Some of these things just come up, and that's why we feel that we need to have a tool in our pocket every single day. Will we actually use that tool every single day? Absolutely not. Will we even go multiple days in a row without using that tool? Yes. But on average, there will be multiple things every week that needs to be done. And if I have that tool in my pocket, I'm going to do it then and there rather than procrastinating it. A great example is having a flashlight as part of your EDC. I'm sure there are some people that need to use a flashlight a dozen times a day. But for me, there's exactly one use case when I'm here in the suburbs, and that is taking my dogs on their nighttime walk before bed and being able to see where they did their business when there's no street lamps. That is the one use case I have for a flashlight, and yet that flashlight is always in my sling bag. And so that got me thinking, why do I have this flashlight in my sling bag if I'm using it once a day at most, and not even every single time I take the dogs out? Sometimes we are under a street light and I don't need it. But then I realize, okay, when we're at the cabin, 3, 4, 5 days a week, and it gets dark there are no street lights, and I do actually need that flashlight 4 or 5 times a day when I'm out bringing in firewood or clearing off the hot tub or taking the dogs down the lane to do their business. I do actually need it multiple times a day. And so by having it in my sling bag, I always know where it is. I'm not necessarily going to use it every day. Could I keep it in the truck? Yes. Could I, keep it in the cabin itself? Yes. But since I do need it for multiple use cases across the different parts of my life, I keep it in my sling bag. And sometimes I feel silly about it, but then sometimes a bunch of utility comes all at once and it just makes sense to have it there. So, do I think there are reasons to keep tools with you in your pocket, in your bag? Yes, I do. And I maybe have convinced myself into that because I've been influenced by other people. But I do see enough daily utility, or at least weekly utility, in these things that I continue to do it. Now, there is a slippery slope here, and it honestly all comes back to social media. But the slippery slope is, of course, not feeling like you're good enough, or like your carry is good enough, or your tools are good enough. And it makes you think to myself, okay, what's the next tool that I need? Or what's the next pickup? What's the next drop that I'm going to buy from? And this is where I've really been struggling, because I am part of all sorts of different social media platforms. I see things on Instagram. I see things on Reddit. I see things on YouTube. I'm posting on YouTube. I'm part of this overall machine. And what gets me multiple times a year is seeing a shiny new tool. You buy the tool and then it shows up. You use it a couple of times because it's shiny and new, but then you go back to what you were carrying before, because turns out the thing that you actually reach for every day is the thing that solves real use cases. And this is the part that I really struggle with, because I will acquire something like a pry bar or a utility blade or a set of EDC pliers or something, and I will quickly realize that it's good to have those things, but do they need to be an everyday carry item? No, I don't think so. And so there's this trap that you fall into by seeing what other people are carrying, and they themselves may not even be using those items, but because they look good in a layup, they look good, in a flat picture on top of a trendy handkerchief, they broadcast to the world that it's what they actually need in their day-to-day life. And I fully expect that 9 times out of 10, that's not actually true, but it convinces everybody else, myself included, that it's something you need to have. And so I've been thinking really hard about the use case driven EDC versus the community driven EDC. And it's really tough to disambiguate them sometimes, because you will sometimes see a shiny new object and then make up a use case that you believe you have in order to justify getting that thing. And I've had to basically put a full halt on acquiring new stuff, because I can't actually legitimately prove to myself that I have a real use case for it, and I didn't just convince myself into it because I saw it as part of someone else's carry on the internet. Now, I don't want to come across as someone who's knocking the EDC creator ecosystem, because, like I said, I'm part of this machine. I'm posting content about this. I'm posting my own point of view, and so it would be ridiculous for me to say that the EDC community on the internet is horrible and dumb, because that's just not true. There's plenty of good things that come out of it, and I do believe lots of people feel, a sense of community that is valuable, and I don't want to undermine that. What I have an issue with is the completely unnecessary acquisition of tools. That's the main thing I have a problem with. And the other big issue I see is when people tie it to manhood. This absolutely boils my blood. I see video titles of, 3 fixed blades that every man has to carry. And I think, what the hell are you talking about? Do you think that person X is any more or less of a man because of the tools that they do or do not carry in their pocket? That to me is absurd and should absolutely not be taking place in this community. There is such a distorted view of manhood, the importance of manhood, and what actually is entailed in manhood that I simply cannot get into because A, I'm not an expert, and B, it will make me too angry. But anyone who is gauging their manhood or gauging the value of themselves as a man based on the tools that they carry, I I really wish that we could just escape from that trap. It's not at all a measure of a man. It never has been, it never will be. And anyone who tries to portray that fact on social media, they should really rethink what they're doing, because you can feel however you feel about your own self and your own manhood and the importance of that manhood. But if you're trying to convince other people that they are more or less of a man or a good person or whatever it may be because of the products that they purchase and keep in their pockets, that's a line I can't cross, and it absolutely boils my blood. So if I'm saying that I do believe having tools and keeping those tools on your person is valuable as long as it is tied to a real, true use case and brings actual, repeatable value to your life, then how do you know when you have enough? How do you know what is sufficient and what is superfluous, what is excess? This is really tough because I don't have a one and done answer for this. It is something that I have fallen into the trap of. Why do I need two different, 2 to 4 inch folding pocket knives? I do not need more than one. There is simply no need for it. I can absolutely understand wanting those things, and there is some amount of joy that comes from the art of researching and finding quality items that will last you a long time. I've made videos on Buy It for Life and intentional consumerism, and all of these things can still exist while also acknowledging the fact that you probably do not need 5 different folding knives that are within an inch of each other in blade length. And so this comes into the collectors, users, and even the begrudging tool users out there, right? Some people could care less about EDC and the community, and they just need tools for their job, and they drop those tools in the back of their vehicle at the end of the day, and they don't give it another thought. And when it breaks, they buy a new one, and if they don't use it, they don't bring it. And then there's the folks, probably at least that I consider myself a part of, which is, could I get by without having a pocket knife in my pocket every single day? Yes, I absolutely could. I do it because of the added convenience and because it helps me to stop procrastinating when I see a task that needs to be done. What I don't relate with, and also do not want to throw any proper shade onto, is the collectors. Now, there is absolutely something to be said for collecting as a hobby and collecting as something that brings you joy and wanting to have, all of the different variants of a certain knife, or having every knife from a certain maker or company, or having, a wide variety of these things for display or for whatever. It's the same as, collecting stamps or snow globes or whatever. There's an inherent joy and value in just the act of collecting. It's something I don't relate with, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have any value. And where I see an issue is if you end up going down a path of financial irresponsibility or, financial hardship because of that trend. And I hate to see, anyone go and go beyond their means to acquire some shiny thing because they feel that they need to post it on Instagram to get, likes or, feel some kind of self-worth. that just doesn't make sense to me. So I just want some deep thought to be put into, why do I use and carry these tools? Why do I acquire that thing? Why do I feel that I need that thing? Why do I feel that I need one more tool? Why do I feel that I need a pouch to put my tools in? Why do I feel like I need a bag to put my pouch, to put my, you know what I mean? So there's just real thought that needs to be put into it. And hopefully you can put that thought in before you acquire the next thing. But, the best time to do it would be before. The next best time to do it is now. And I think it's important that we all think hard about that. And if you collect for the joy of collecting, don't let me stop you. I think that's great. But if you're collecting just for the sake of not being bored with your tools, or because you feel that you need to keep up appearances in the EDC community, then I think some more thought needs to go into that. Now, a quagmire that I've found myself in that I still have conflicted feelings about is I have my first ever custom knife on its way to me right now. And it took, a long time for this knife to be made. It's handmade by someone I respect, and it's going to be a beautiful thing. And I'm, excited about it, but I'm also really conflicted about it because the actual motivation for acquiring this knife was because I respect and am interested in the maker. I don't actually need the tool. And this is something that I can't fully wrap my head around because on one hand, I really do want to support the makers, the independent people who are doing interesting and creative things in this space. But on the other hand, I have quite literally acquired a tool that I am admitting I don't need. And this is something to me that feels very unsure in myself. And I don't know what the right answer here is. And I would like you to weigh in on this concept of buying things because you like and respect the maker versus buying things because you need and require the tool for a particular use case. This is something I think is somewhat unique to the EDC space because theoretically all of these independent makers are building things that people need. But if I go and purchase a custom knife from a really exciting maker when a knife I already own already performs the use case and is less beautiful and is going to get more actual use because I don't want to tarnish the beautiful work of art, then what is the reason behind it? What is the actual driving force behind making that purchase? Do I want to support a maker? Do I want to own a beautiful piece of, machined art? Do I want a tool that I'm going to use? Are any of those reasons more valid than the others? This is something I struggle with, so please let me know what you think. This brings me to the topic of knife steals and all of this stuff, and this is another area where I struggle and I have a little bit of, self-doubt or absurdity around these things where I have previously talked myself into buying a very similar knife to one that I already own because it's a different knife steal. Because, this one's a tool steal and this one's a super steal and this one's a carbon and this one's a blah, 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 right? And this is another category of things where I have found myself very frustrated that I fell into this trap where, I have a knife that is S30V and I've been carrying it in my pocket for 3 years. This one over here is very similar, but it's MagnaCut, and therefore it is going to improve my life or increase my ability to complete a task in some way, shape, or form. And in my experience, that has not happened. I have not gotten significantly easier or better utility out of a tool because it is MagnaCut over S30V or whatever. And so this is something that I think has become certainly overhyped and is honestly causing a bit of problem because People argue about knife steals. People get a little obsessed over knife steals. And again, not to disparage the collecting aspect of this, but the fact that the average suburban person like myself, who has brief but intense spurts of strong usage for these tools, am I ever actually truly going to significantly experience a difference in my life because I use a blade that is S30V versus MagnaCut? I really don't think so. So I'm really trying to take blade steel out of the equation and not focus on it really at all. There will be some cases where, it is just a bad choice because maybe it's hard to sharpen and I don't have the proper, facilities to sharpen a blade that has such high toughness and hardness that you need a belt grinder in order to sharpen it. That would not make any sense, and I would stay away from something like that. But as long as I can realistically use it in my life and it's not going to be something completely inconvenient, I don't see why I should choose one steel over the other, because it's not going to make that big of a difference in my real life. All right, so I've been talking too much already, so let's, tie this up with a bow and really get to the point of, why bother with EDC in the first place. And so I think what it comes down to for me is have real, tangible, repeatable use cases in your life in order to justify purchasing and carrying tools. Number 2, don't let the shiny, impressive, beautiful flat lays you see on Instagram and Reddit convince you into buying tools that you don't need. Really think critically about when I have enough, when I have the utility that I need to get through my daily life, and don't go purchasing some slightly different tool than the one you already have just because you think it will slightly enhance your life, when in fact you might only use it 3 times and then put it in a drawer. It's okay to have different tools for different situations in your life. You don't need to carry a fixed blade belt knife all week because you'll use it for one day on the weekend when you're out camping. It is okay to carry a keychain Swiss Army knife if that's what's going to get you through your daily life. It's not tied to your self-worth. It's not tied to your manhood, and there's no reason to change your daily carry or your perspective on tools and utility just because somebody on the internet, myself included, told you that you should. And finally, it's perfectly okay if you derive joy from collecting and being part of the EDC community and, doing the beautiful flat lays on Instagram, but don't let it pull you into bad financial decisions. Don't let it influence your mental health. Don't let yourself get dragged down. If it brings you up and it brings you joy and it makes you happy, by all means, go for it. But don't let the opinions or the flashy carries of other people on the internet convince you that you are not good enough, you are not ready enough, and that you don't have what you need to live your life, because it's probably not true. All right, well, if you made it this far, I really do appreciate it. I am not going to stop making content around tools and carry and EDC because it is something that I get legitimate utility from in my life, but I am seriously thinking critically, and I hope you will as well, about why I do these things. I'm seriously putting a stopper on purchasing and acquiring new things just because, I see it on the internet. I have made videos about intentional consumerism, and sometimes I slip, sometimes I make, errors in judgment there, but I'm really trying hard this year to focus more on the outcomes that I get from learning skills, from learning how to build something, learning how to fix something, learning how to improve my own sustainability, my own capability, my own ability to handle emergencies and unknown situations, rather than focusing ever on just the tool for the tool's sake. And I hope that if you agree with me, you'll leave a comment. If you disagree with me, you'll leave a comment. Obviously be respectful, because I don't think anybody wants to, hear someone else yelling on the internet about, self-worth and, manhood and all of these things, because it's just not worth it. But I do want to hear your opinions. I do want to hear where you agree and disagree. Just keep it respectful, please. And I hope that you'll go and check out some of the other videos I've made on these topics. I hope that you will hit the subscribe button, because I am posting a new video every week, and I do really want to see this channel and this community grow this year. But more than anything, I hope you stay ready, get set, and go enjoy your life. Cheers.